My name is Rachel, and if you had told me a few years ago that my own parents would see me as nothing more than spare parts to keep my sister alive, I would have laughed at the absurdity of it. But looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been so surprised. My family was always complicated. On the outside, we looked like any other middle-class family. 2 daughters, a neat suburban home, and parents who attended PTA meetings and hosted barbecues. But behind closed doors, there was always a clear divide, one that left me feeling like a stranger in my own home. My sister Amanda was 2 years older than me. From the day I was born, she was the star. She was the golden child, the apple of my parents' eyes, the one who could do no wrong. Me, I was the afterthought, the one they barely noticed unless they needed someone to clean up Amanda's messes. She was cruel to me in ways that only siblings know how to be cruel. But while most sisters grow out of that childish bullying, Amanda seemed to perfect it as an art form. She mocked me for my clothes, sabotaged my friendships, spread rumors at school, and when I fought back, my parents always sided with her. It wasn't just favoritism, it was worship. My mom would beam with pride when Amanda came home with even the smallest achievement, while my accomplishments barely earned a nod. When I made the honor roll, my dad brushed it off with, "Well, at least Amanda is popular. That's what really matters." And when Amanda got into trouble cheating on a test, crashing the car, shoplifting, it was somehow always my fault. They said I should have been a better influence on her, or that I was jealous and trying to make her look bad. I learned early on that in my house, no matter what Amanda did, she would always be the victim, and I would always be the villain. Still, I tried to carve out my own little life. I threw myself into schoolwork, found solace in books, and dreamed of the day I'd move out and finally breathe without my sister's shadow suffocating me. But the older we got, the more toxic the dynamic became. Amanda's cruelty turned physical, shoving me into walls, slapping me when no one was looking. And when I complained, my mom would sigh and say, "Rachel, don't be dramatic. Sisters fight. You should be more forgiving." But there's a big difference between sisterly squabbles and full-blown abuse. By the time I was in college, Amanda had perfected the art of manipulation. She could cry on command, twist stories to make herself look innocent, and my parents ate it up like gospel. I was the scapegoat, the problem child, the ungrateful daughter. Then, one phone call changed everything. It was my mom. Her voice was frantic, trembling in a way I had never heard before. "Rachel, it's your sister. She's very sick. The doctors say she needs a liver transplant." I froze. My mind went blank. Amanda was sick. For a split second, a wave of guilt hit me. Despite everything, she was still my sister. But then my mom's voice hardened, and what she said next shattered me. "They tested the family. You're the only match. You'll have to do it, Rachel. It's your duty as her sister." My duty. Those words echoed in my head like a curse. Not, "Would you consider it?" Or, "Are you willing?" No, it was a command, an expectation. They didn't even ask. They told me. I remember sitting in my tiny dorm room, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart raced. The thought of going under the knife, of sacrificing a part of my body for Amanda, terrified me. But it wasn't just the surgery, it was the principle. Why should I risk my life for someone who had spent her entire existence making mine miserable? Why should I bleed for the sister who wouldn't even hesitate to hurt me if it meant she got her way? I asked the most obvious question. What about Amanda? Has she changed? Does she even want me to do this? My mom scoffed, as if I had just asked the dumbest thing in the world. Of course, she wants you to. She deserves this chance. She's special. She has a future. Don't you want to help your sister? There it was again. Amanda's future was worth more than mine. My life, my safety, my body, it was all expendable as long as Amanda got what she needed. I told my mom I needed time to think. She didn't like that answer. By the time I came home for the weekend, the pressure had already started. My dad gave me the cold shoulder. My mom lectured me endlessly. And Amanda? She didn't thank me, didn't beg, didn't even acknowledge that I had a choice. She smirked, as if she had already won. As if my body was hers to claim. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Rachel," she said one evening, her voice dripping with venom. "You know you're going to do it. Mom and Dad won't let you say no. You've always been the useless one, so the least you can do is finally be good for something." Her words burned into me like acid. I went to bed that night shaking, torn between fear and rage. The next morning, I found a stack of medical consent forms neatly laid out on the kitchen table, with my parents hovering nearby. My dad's jaw was set, his eyes cold. My mom's voice was eerily calm. "Sign the papers, Rachel," she said. "Be a good daughter." I stared at the forms, my hand trembling. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to fight, to refuse. But the weight of their expectations pressed down on me like a boulder. The room felt suffocating. My father's gaze was like a threat. Amanda's smug expression in the background was like a taunt. I didn't sign. I pushed the papers back and whispered, "I need time." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, my dad's hand slammed down on the table, rattling the glasses. He leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "You selfish, ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By letting your sister die." I wanted to scream. What had they ever done for me except tear me down? But the words stuck in my throat. That weekend was pure hell. Every meal was another lecture, every glance was filled with disappointment or disgust. Amanda paraded around like a queen, already planning her recovery. Already talking about what she would do once she got her life back. Meanwhile, I felt like I was drowning. The pressure was unbearable. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, something happened that changed everything. I overheard a conversation late one night. My parents were in the kitchen, whispering furiously. My dad's voice was sharp. My mom's was panicked. I crept closer, heart pounding, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "She doesn't need to know," my dad hissed. "If she refuses, we'll guilt her until she breaks. But she can never find out the truth." The truth? What truth? I pressed my ear to the door, barely breathing. If Rachel knew she wasn't really Amanda's sister, she wouldn't feel obligated. "We can't let that happen. Not until after the surgery." The words hit me like a freight train. Not really her sister. What did that even mean? My mind raced. Were they saying I wasn't biologically related? That Amanda and I didn't share the same blood? My heart pounded so loud I thought they'd hear it. I stumbled back into my room, my whole body shaking. Suddenly, the years of favoritism, the cruelty, the endless reminders that Amanda was the chosen one, it all made a twisted kind of sense. What if I wasn't really theirs? What if I was just convenient? That night, I couldn't sleep. My entire world felt like it was crumbling. But deep down, a spark of something new ignited inside me. Not fear, not despair. Something sharper. Stronger. The morning after I overheard my parents' conversation, I woke up with my stomach twisted into knots. The house felt different, like I was trapped inside a stranger's home. Every time I looked at my parents, every time Amanda smirked at me, all I could hear were those words, "She doesn't need to know." Not until after the surgery. I couldn't confront them outright. If I did, they'd deny everything, turn it around on me like they always had. No, I needed proof. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to get them by asking nicely. That weekend, I pretended to go back to college early, but instead I stayed in town. I used the excuse of studying with friends to buy myself some freedom from their constant surveillance. My first stop was the local clinic. I walked in trembling, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the clipboard they handed me. "I'd like to do a DNA test," I whispered to the nurse at the counter. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you have the other person here for comparison?" I hesitated. No, Amanda wasn't here. And there was no way she'd willingly let me swab her cheek. But I did have something else, something better. A week earlier, Amanda had left her hairbrush in the bathroom. A couple strands of her long blonde hair were still tangled in the bristles. I had tucked it away in a plastic bag, almost on instinct. I didn't know why at the time, but now I realized it might be my ticket to the truth. I slid the bag across the counter, my voice barely audible. "Will this work?" The nurse studied it, then nodded. "Yes, it'll take some time to process. We'll call you when the results are ready." I walked out of the clinic with my heart racing. It was done. The test was in motion. All I had to do now was wait. But waiting wasn't easy. Back at home, the pressure was worse than ever. My mom hovered constantly, reminding me how precious Amanda's life was. My dad watched me like a hawk, his temper simmering just beneath the surface. And Amanda seemed to delight in my torment. One night, she cornered me in the hallway. "You know, Rachel, I've been thinking about what I'll do once I recover. Maybe I'll finally move out, get my own place. Mom and Dad can relax without worrying about me anymore." She leaned in close, her breath hot on my ear. But you'll always be nothing. No one will ever care about you. You'll be forgotten the moment I'm back on my feet. Her words cut deeper than any knife, but instead of breaking me, they fueled me. If Amanda thought I was weak, she had no idea what I was capable of. The next week crawled by. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat. I jumped at shadows, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind was consumed with one thought: the DNA test. Finally, the call came. I ducked into an empty stairwell at school and answered, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Rachel, this is the lab. We have your results. I held my breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. There is no biological relation between the two samples. The DNA does not match. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. My knees went weak. I sank onto the cold concrete step, my phone still pressed to my ear. Not related, not sisters. The words repeated in my mind like a drumbeat. Amanda wasn't my sister. My parents weren't really my parents. Everything I had believed, everything I had endured, every scar from years of abuse, it all suddenly made sense. I was never one of them. That's why Amanda was the golden child. That's why I was disposable. That's why they didn't care about me. For a few minutes, I sat in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a smile crept across my face. A dangerous, vengeful smile. Because now I held the ultimate weapon. The truth, but I couldn't rush. If I went charging into the house, screaming about DNA tests, they'd find a way to spin it, to discredit me. No, I needed to be smart. Careful, calculated. I started planning. The first step was to gather every scrap of evidence I could. I requested a physical copy of the test results and stored it in a safety deposit box downtown, away from prying eyes. Then I started digging through old photo albums, legal papers, anything I could get my hands on. One night, when everyone else was asleep, I crept into my parents' study. The room smelled of stale coffee and old books. My hands shook as I rifled through the drawers, careful not to leave a trace. That's when I found a faded envelope tucked beneath a stack of tax documents. My name was written on the front in a handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a birth certificate. But it wasn't the one my parents had shown me growing up. This one was different. It listed my mother as someone else entirely. A woman named Evelyn Carter. My father's line was blank. I clutched the paper, my mind spinning. So it was true. I wasn't theirs. They had lied to me my entire life. I stuffed the certificate back into the envelope and returned it to the drawer. My heart hammering. They couldn't know I had seen it? Not yet. Over the next few days, I noticed things I had ignored before. The way my mom flinched whenever someone commented that I didn't look like Amanda. The way my dad snapped whenever I asked questions about my childhood. The way Amanda sneered when people called us sisters. They all knew. They had known all along. And they had planned to use me anyway. The rage that built inside me was unlike anything I had ever felt. For years, I had accepted being treated like trash. I had convinced myself it was just bad parenting, bad luck. But now I realized it wasn't me, it was them. They weren't my family, they were my captors, my tormentors. Liars who had trapped me in a role I never chose. And they thought they could steal a piece of my body to save their precious Amanda. Not anymore. I began to distance myself, watching them more closely than ever. Every smile, every word, every fake display of affection, it all disgusted me. My parents still pressured me, guilt-tripping me daily. Amanda still taunted me, her arrogance growing as the surgery date drew closer. But behind my silence, behind my mask of compliance, I was plotting. I started researching my rights. Could they force me to donate? Could they legally sign the papers without my consent? The more I read, the more relieved I became. No. The law was on my side. They couldn't touch me unless I agreed. Still, they were desperate. And desperate people make dangerous choices. I had to be ready for anything. I kept my DNA results hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew I couldn't just refuse. If I said no, they'd find another way to trap me, to manipulate me. No, I needed to destroy them completely. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something. This wasn't just about saving myself. This was about revenge. For every insult, every slap, every night I cried alone while Amanda was praised. For every time my parents looked at me with disgust instead of love. For every scar on my soul. They had taken everything from me. Now, I was going to take everything from them. And it all started with the truth. The DNA results were a weapon. And every day I carried them in my mind like a hidden blade. My parents thought I was wavering, thought I was softening to their guilt trips. But the truth was, I was waiting for Amanda to get weaker. Waiting for them to grow more desperate. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike so my revenge would cut the deepest. Amanda's health started deteriorating fast. The once smug, vibrant queen of the house now looked pale, hollow-eyed, and irritable. Yet even as her body betrayed her, her cruelty toward me never dimmed. If anything, it grew sharper. She snapped at me constantly, demanding I fetch her water, fix her meals, run errands. She called me her servant, laughing even as she struggled to breathe. "You should be grateful," she sneered one afternoon as I set down a tray of soup. "When I get my new liver, I'll finally be able to live the life I deserve, and you'll finally have done something useful." I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Every cell in my body wanted to scream at her, to throw the tray at the wall and reveal the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to play the obedient little sister they wanted me to be. Because I knew the deeper they believed I was compliant, the more devastating my eventual betrayal would be. At night, I researched endlessly. I learned about medical ethics, about donor rights, about lawsuits. I read stories of people who had sued families for coercion. The more I read, the more confident I became. The law was a shield, but the truth was my sword. And I was going to use both. Still, I couldn't act rashly. My parents hovered constantly, monitoring my every move. My mom was the worst, her voice dripping with fake sweetness as she reminded me daily how much Amanda counted on me. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, she said, "Rachel, do you realize what a blessing this is? You get to be the reason your sister lives. You'll be a hero. Imagine how grateful she'll be." Amanda chuckled darkly. "Oh, don't worry, Mom, I'll be sure to thank her. Once she's out of the hospital bed and I'm not." The table erupted in laughter, my parents joining in, Amanda grinning despite her pale face. I sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth, my heart pounding with rage. They weren't even pretending anymore. To them, I was a tool, a spare part, a body to harvest. But inside, I was already writing their downfall. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I told my parents I was going to study with friends, but instead, I walked into a sleek office downtown. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, listened quietly as I laid everything out: the pressure, the abuse, the DNA test. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Rachel, what your parents are attempting is not only immoral, it's illegal. They cannot force you to undergo surgery. And if they've hidden the fact that you're not biologically related, that opens up a whole new avenue of legal action." Her words lit a fire in me. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't weak. I had power. And the law was on my side. She helped me start drafting a lawsuit that could expose my parents' deception, potentially strip them of assets, and give me control of my own life. But she warned me, timing was everything. If I went public too soon, they'd fight back, twist the narrative. I had to wait until Amanda's condition forced them to make their final, desperate move. That's when I'd reveal the truth, so I waited. Weeks passed, and Amanda's health spiraled further. The golden child was no longer golden, her skin yellowed, her body frail. My parents grew frantic, their patience with me thinning by the day. One night, my father cornered me in the living room. His face was red, his fists clenched. "Enough games, Rachel. Your sister's dying. If you don't sign those papers soon, I swear," he stopped himself, his jaw tight. But I saw the violence in his eyes, the same violence I'd felt in his hands before. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "You can't make me." For a moment, his expression faltered. Then he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Amanda, meanwhile, grew crueler in her desperation. She demanded I sit by her bedside, berating me for hours about how worthless I was. One night, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and hissed, "You think you're better than me, don't you? But you're nothing without me. You were born to serve me. That's all you'll ever be." I yanked my arm free and walked out without a word. On the outside, I kept my mask of silence. On the inside, her words only sharpened my resolve. Finally, the day came. My parents called a family meeting. We sat around the dining table, the air heavy with tension. Amanda lay on the couch nearby, her frail body draped in a blanket. her eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. My mom slid the consent forms across the table. "Rachel, it's time. No more delays. Your sister's life depends on you." My dad's voice was low, dangerous. "Sin. Now." Amanda smirked from the couch. "Come on, Rachel. Be a good little donor." My hand hovered over the papers. My parents leaned in, anticipation in their eyes. They thought they had won. They thought their manipulation had finally broken me. But instead of picking up the pen, I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope. I placed it on the table with deliberate calm. "What's this?" my mom asked, her smile faltering. I met her gaze, my voice steady. "The truth." I opened the envelope and spread the contents across the table. DNA test results. A copy of the birth certificate. Legal papers drafted by my lawyer. My parents froze, their faces draining of color. Amanda sat up, confusion flickering. In her eyes, "What is this supposed to be?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Proof that I'm not your sister. Proof that I don't owe you anything. Proof that everything you've built your lives on is a lie." The room went silent. My mom's hand trembled as she reached for the papers, scanning them desperately. My dad's jaw tightened, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Amanda stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Finally, my father slammed his fist on the table. "This means nothing. You're still living under our roof, eating our food." "Not for long," I interrupted, my voice cold. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. If you try to force me, if you keep pressuring me, I'll sue. I'll expose you for the frauds you are. I'll take everything from you." Their faces twisted with shock and fury, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. Amanda's voice cracked, weak but venomous. "You can't do this to me. You're supposed to save me. I deserve this." I leaned closer, my eyes burning with years of suppressed rage. "You deserve nothing." The room exploded into chaos. My mom sobbed, my dad shouted, Amanda wailed, but I didn't stay to listen. I gathered my papers, stood tall, and walked out the door. For the first time, I felt free, but my revenge wasn't finished. Not yet. Walking out of that house was the most liberating moment of my life. The cool night air hit my face like a baptism. For years, I had been suffocated by their control, their abuse, their cruelty. Now, with every step away, I felt the chains loosing. But freedom wasn't enough. I hadn't endured all those years of torment just to slip away quietly. I wanted them to suffer. I wanted them to feel the weight of every scar they'd left on me. The next morning, I met with my lawyer again. She was impressed with how I had handled the confrontation. "Good," she said, sliding the stack of documents back toward me. "They know you're serious now. But we're not stopping here. If you want to make sure they can't touch you again, we need to go public." Her plan was brilliant and merciless. We'd file a lawsuit for medical coercion, parental abuse, and concealment of biological truth. At the same time, we'd leak the story anonymously at first to the media. "Nothing destroys abusers like the weight of public opinion," she explained. "If my parents and Amanda thought they could control me, wait until they were dragged under the harsh spotlight of judgment." I nodded, fire in my veins. "Do it. I want the world to know what they've done." Within a week, the legal papers were filed. I watched as my parents were served, the smug confidence they once carried crumbling into shock and outrage. My mom called me 20 times and, one day, sobbing into voicemail after voicemail, begging me to reconsider. My dad's messages were threats, laced with fury. "You'll regret this, Rachel. You'll regret crossing this family." Amanda sent one message. Just one. "You're killing me, and I'll never forgive you." I stared at the words, waiting for guilt to bloom inside me. It never came. Instead, I laughed an ugly, bitter laugh I didn't recognize as my own. For once, Amanda was right. I wasn't forgiving her. Not now, not ever. The story hit the internet like a wildfire. Young woman forced by parents to donate organ to abusive sibling discovers she's not biologically related. It was everywhere. Threads dissecting every detail. News sites picking up the scandal. Talk shows debating the ethics. Strangers flooded my inbox with support, some sharing their own stories of family abuse. Others just sending encouragement. For the first time, I wasn't alone. I wasn't silenced. My voice mattered, but the more the public rallied behind me, the more my family unraveled. My dad lost clients at his firm. One wanted to work with a man accused of coercing his daughter into organ donation. My mom stopped showing her face in public, too humiliated by the whispers and stares. And Amanda? Well, Amanda's world shrank to hospital rooms and bitter resentment. She tried to play the victim, giving a tearful interview about her selfish little sister abandoning her in her time of need, but the internet tore her apart. People dug up old social media posts where she mocked me, ridiculed me, treated me like dirt. Screenshots surfaced, stories from classmates who remembered her cruelty. The facade crumbled. Amanda wasn't the poor dying girl anymore. She was the abuser who finally faced consequences. I should have felt satisfied. But I wasn't done. My lawyer pushed the lawsuit forward, and soon, we were in court. Sitting across from my parents, that first day was surreal. My father, once so towering and intimidating, now looked tired, sagging under the weight of disgrace. My mother, her face, blotchy from crying, avoided my eyes. Amanda wasn't there, too sick to attend, but her absence only reminded everyone why we were there. The courtroom echoed with every word of my lawyer's opening statement. She painted a picture of a young woman treated as a disposable tool, of parents who concealed the truth of her birth to control her, of years of abuse culminating in an attempt to strip her of her bodily autonomy. It was brutal. It was raw. It was my story, spoken aloud for the first time where they couldn't silence me. When my father's lawyer tried to argue, he stumbled. The DNA test was undeniable. The messages, the pressure, the abuse, it was all documented. Every time they thought they had control, I had proof. I watched them squirm. And I felt powerful. But Amanda's health cast a long shadow over everything. Rumors spread that she was near the bottom of the transplant list. Without me, her chances grew slimmer. Each day, part of me, an old, bruised, wounded part, still wrestled with guilt. What if she died? Was I heartless? Was I cruel? Then I remembered the years of torment. The names she called me. The nights she locked me out of my room. The time she stole from me, broke me, laughed at my pain. She had never once considered my life worth anything. Why should I consider hers? The lawsuit dragged on, but the tide was clearly against my parents. Evidence stacked higher and higher. My lawyer whispered, one afternoon, as we walked out of court, they'll settle soon. They're bleeding money, bleeding reputation. They can't win this. And she was right. A month later, my parents' attorney approached with an offer. They wanted to settle out of court money, freedom, silence. But I refused silence. No, I told my lawyer firmly. I don't want their money. I want their exposure. I want the judgment on record. I want everyone to know what they did. So we pressed forward. Meanwhile, Amanda's situation grew desperate. Friends of hers, few who hadn't abandoned her, tried to guilt me on social media. She's dying. How can you just stand by? But the comments were drowned out by thousands defending me. The world had chosen sides, and it wasn't hers. Then, one night I got a call. It was my mother. Her voice was hoarse, broken. Rachel, please. She doesn't have much time left. She's asking for you. I almost hung up. But something in me needed closure. So I went. Amanda lay in the hospital bed, tubes snaking around her, her skin waxy and pale. She looked at me with hollow eyes, but there was still venom there. You, Juan, she rasped, her voice barely more than a whisper. You ruined us. Are you happy? I stood at the foot of her bed, my arms crossed. No, not yet. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. You think this makes you strong? You think anyone cares once I'm gone? You'll still be nothing. I leaned closer, my voice steady, cutting through the room. I'm more than you ever let me be. And now, the whole world knows what you are. That's my victory. She closed her eyes, turning her face away. For once, she had no retort. I left the hospital that night without looking back. Weeks later, the court delivered its verdict. My parents were found guilty of abuse, coercion, and concealment of biological truth. They were ordered to pay damages, stripped of certain legal rights, and left with reputations in ruins. Their empire of control had collapsed. I stood outside the courthouse, reporters clamoring for quotes. I didn't give them much, just one line. I'm free now, and I hope others see they can be too. The cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward me, but I walked past them, head high, heart light. I had won. Not just freedom, not just revenge, but justice. The morning after the verdict, the house I had grown up in felt smaller somehow. The walls seemed lower, the ceilings pressed down heavier. My parents hadn't left, but the weight of their defeat hung over them like a storm cloud. I passed them in the hallway, my head high, their eyes avoiding mine. There was no apology, no explanation, just silence. The silence was satisfying in a way words could never be. Amanda wasn't around. She had been transferred to a different facility for intensive care. She had no idea the legal storm I had unleashed. For once, she wasn't in control. She couldn't bully, threaten, or manipulate. She was helpless, and I had orchestrated it all. I spent the day meeting with my lawyer again, going over the financial settlements and legal documents. My parents' assets were frozen until the court decided how damages would be paid. My lawyer explained that some of their properties would be liquidated to cover the costs. I didn't feel joy in that, at least, not the kind that comes from taking someone else's wealth. The satisfaction came from justice, from the knowledge that manipulation and cruelty had consequences. In the evening, I received a call from the hospital. Amanda had requested to see me. I hesitated, wondering if it was worth it. But curiosity won. I wanted to see the girl who had haunted my life for so long, to witness the weight of her defeat firsthand. When I walked into her room, she was pale and weak, hooked to monitors and IV, but her eyes, the ones that had once burned with arrogance, were clouded with confusion and fear. She tried to speak, but her voice faltered. You ruined everything," she whispered, hoarse and trembling. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, looking her in the eye. No, I didn't ruin everything. I freed myself. I finally took control of my life. You weren't ever the problem, it was them, I said, nodding toward the machines keeping her alive. Your illness didn't make me act. Their lies, their abuse, their manipulation, that's what set me free. Amanda stared at me, silent. There were no tears, no words, just the sharp edge of her realization that for the first time, she was powerless. I'm sorry, she finally muttered, a hollow apology without sincerity, without understanding. I didn't reply. Words would change nothing. Actions had already spoken. After that visit, I walked out into the crisp evening air. The city lights glimmered in the distance, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity. I had endured abuse, manipulation, favoritism, and coercion. I had been treated like disposable property. But I had turned the tables. I had wielded the truth like a sword, and it had cut through the web of lies my family had spun around me. In the following weeks, life slowly began to reshape itself. I moved into a small, modern apartment I had secured with my settlements. The place was no one else's. I furnished it simply but beautifully, surrounding myself with comfort and security I had never known growing up. Each item I placed, each choice I made, reminded me that this was my life now. Mine, no strings attached. I started a career in advocacy, helping others like me, people trapped by family abuse, manipulation, or coercion. I shared my story carefully, using the truth as both shield and weapon, guiding others toward their own freedom. For every person I helped, I felt a sense of purpose that Amanda's life had never demanded. Meanwhile, my parents tried to rebuild, but their reputation was ruined. The social circles that once praised them now whispered behind their backs. Clients and friends abandoned them. Their empire of control had crumbled. Amanda's recovery was slow. The transplant never happened. She eventually left the hospital, frail and bitter, and returned to a life where her power over me was gone. She called once, a weak attempt at reconciliation or manipulation. I couldn't tell. I didn't respond. Months later, I received the final paperwork confirming the settlements had been distributed. My parents stripped of their remaining authority over me. I was legally, financially, and emotionally independent. I walked away from their control, from Amanda's cruelty, from the toxic environment that had defined my life for so long. I stood on my balcony that night, looking at the city lights and feeling the weight of freedom settle over me. For the first time, I could breathe without guilt, without fear, without manipulation. I had been a victim for too long, but the victim's era was over. Now, I was the victor. I realized then that revenge isn't always about cruelty or pain. Sometimes, it's about reclaiming what was stolen. My body, my life, my voice, they had tried to take it all. But I had fought back, legally, financially, morally. I had proven that truth and justice could prevail over lies and abuse. As I sipped a glass of wine and watched the city sparkle beneath the night sky, I allowed myself a small, private smile. My story, my pain, my struggle, it had all led to this moment. I had walked out of darkness, wielded the truth, and emerged stronger, freer, untouchable. For years, I had been told I was nothing. Now, I knew I was everything I ever needed to be. Rachel, independent, unstoppable, and victorious. And so, I closed the chapter on my old life, stepping fully into the new one. The pain of the past lingered, but it no longer held me captive. The lies had been exposed, the abusers exposed, and the world had watched as I claimed what was rightfully mine. Freedom, justice, and truth, my ultimate revenge.